Hey everybody, it's Kevin Hogan from the Gold Prospectors Association of America, and welcome to September, or as we're calling it around the office this year, September. It is the celebration, the month-long celebration of our founder, George Buzzard Massie's birthday. And this year, we are pulling out all the stops. You know, we give away a lot of gold throughout the year, but this month we are giving away a lot of gold. Let me tell you how it works. If you are joining the GPAA for the first time as an annual member, or if you're an annual member and you're renewing your membership, you're going to get the $15 gold bag right off the bat. We're just going to send that to you. But you're also going to be eligible for a gold nugget that at today's spot's worth about $250. It's a pretty good incentive to renew or join. If you are joining as a GPAA paid in full lifetime member, or if you're upgrading any level of your GPAA membership to a paid in full lifetime, not only are you going to get the now famous $500 gold can, which is already loaded full of gold, you are also going to be eligible for the gold nugget, one a day for the rest of the month, that at spot price today was just a little bit under $500. Incredible opportunities. Pick up the phone and call the GPAA office and talk to any member of the member services team. We'll get you set up with your new membership, your renewal, or your upgrade. It's a great way to get some gold before you go out on your next outing.
Well, thanks for tuning in. We dug through the vault and dusted off a real gem for you today. The Buzzard's going to be going up to the far reaches of the planet, up in the Arctic, metal detecting on some Bucket Line Dredge tailings. Some pretty interesting stuff. You don't want to miss this one, folks, so check it out. The old Buzzard with his tips and his tricks.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, my name is George Massie. You know, ladies and gentlemen, for years they've been doing a lot of gold mining in the United States. We had many gold rushes. The first one started back in Virginia, I believe it was, and then to North Georgia, and the first gold mint was in Dahlonega, Georgia, you know, and there's gold all through the eastern belt, and I guess just about every state in the Union. You know, there's a big gold rush even in Oklahoma. But when we come out west later on, after the gold rushes was over, because most of them, the guys back in those days, they used hand equipment, you know, the pick and the number 2 shovel and the sluice box and the dry washer, much the same as we do the gold mining today. But let me tell you that along about 1900, they developed what was called a gold dredge. Now, these weren't the gold dredges that you're used to seeing on the Gold Prospector show. These were great big monstrous dredges with big buckets on them, and they would go in and they would dig up the gravel and dump it over a sluice and a flume and run it back, or a big trommel, and they left a lot of tailing piles. Well, these old dredges weren't too good at getting the gold, and a lot of guys that's a little bit smart and done some research, well, they go back and they take a look at these old tailing piles and they find some pretty good gold. And what the modern day prospector's using, he's using one of these metal detectors, and they work pretty good, by golly. And we're going to go out with Jake, and Jake and I, we're going to take you out there and we're going to see if we can't find some of this gold. And I'll show you what these old Bucket Line gold dredges look like, because they're pretty unique. You know, they left thousands of acres of tailing piles out there in a lot of communities. They run these things back east. They run some of them out in the desert. They set these old dredges in their own pond, and they just slurry the water and work in their own pond. So environmentally, they were pretty good, because they didn't have to get out in the stream. I mean, a lot of them did, but they didn't have to, so they were around a lot longer than hydraulic mining was. As a matter of fact, there's still some of these Bucket Line dredges in operation today up in Alaska. And I think there's one in California that's in operation, and of course Canada and other places. But let's take a look. If you can recognize these old tailing piles, you can get some gold. You got one of these metal detectors at home, get it out of the closet. I got something for you to look for besides pennies. Okay, before we get started with the metal detector looking for nuggets, I want to explain to you why we've come out to a gold dredge today. For those of you that don't know what a gold dredge is, I'm going to show you a little bit about the one that we've got here, and we're going to talk about some of the others. But they had hundreds of these old gold dredges in the United States, and they run them day and night. As a matter of fact, these things had run 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, and with very little downtime. And they're an excellent place to go out nugget shooting. Now, there are a lot of places that you can use your metal detector to find nuggets. You can go to the beaches, you can go out and search the streams and stuff like that. But a lot of people overlook these tailing piles. And there's thousands and thousands of acres of these tailing piles. And let's just talk about this old dredge a little bit and show you what one of them looks like. Most of the time, these old dredges are gone. There's very seldom that you'll find too many of them sitting around. They're either sunk or they've been hauled off and scrapped for the iron and stuff like that that's in them. This over here is, of course, the digging arm. This is the digging ladder, and here are some of the old buckets. And this had an endless chain of buckets that run around, and it dug the material up from the gravel and material up from the bench of the stream, and it dumped it up above into a trommel or into a sluice arrangement. Now, the earlier dredges had sluices in them, and the later ones, like this one here, they had trommels in them. And both of them had problems that was good for you and I, is because the trommel dredges, they have holes in them about the size of your finger, your thumb, or one of your fingers, about a 3/4 hole in this trommel, and any nugget that was too large to go through that hole would go right back into the tailing pile. The sluice dredges, they had a different kind of problem that I'll explain to you. Once the material was dumped up inside here, it went down through the trommel, and then everything that was 3/4 of an inch or smaller would be dumped into a series of sluice boxes and jigging devices that would take the gold and the fine gold out, because there's most miners will tell you that's worth their salt that there's 100 times or maybe even 1,000 times more fine gold than there is large gold. And so really, when they were sitting there working day in, day out, they were looking for the flour gold, the coarse gold, but the nuggets were so rare that they really weren't interested in them. But there were a lot of nuggets, so they weren't worried about losing a few if they could catch most of the gold. Now, these old dredges were pretty efficient because they sat in their own pond and they just moved ahead. And environmentally speaking, they were pretty nice environmentally because they worked mainly in the bench of the stream, or the stream could be diverted around the dredge. The problem that we had with them environmentally is that they threw up these large piles of tailings, and that took away some of the good farmland. Well, now they're taking bulldozers and going back in and leveling these tailing piles, and any of these things that are in operation today, then they have what they call a reclamation. So when they get done mining, they got to take these big D9s and D11s and level those tailing piles and put the topsoil back over, and you can't tell where the old timers have worked. But there is a lot of these tailing piles that's still exposed that you can get on with your metal detector, and you can find some gold. Let's just take a little bit look down here a little bit farther. If you look at this thing sticking out here on the end, that was the stacker. That's where the material went that was rejected out of the trommel. It was stacked up into massive tailing piles. And let me tell you that we're talking about sluice dredges. Here's a riffle, one of the old riffles out of this dredge, but some of them, they had big steel sluice boxes instead of trommels, and all the material go down through those sluice boxes. An old timer one time, he was about 84 years old when he told me this story about 20 years ago. He said, "George," he said, "I'm too old to go back there, but he said, I want you fellas to go back and maybe see if you can find that." He said, "I was working on this gold dredge as a tender," and he said they had a big cage around the sluice box because they wouldn't allow any of the employees on the dredge to get close to the gold. But he said when the water would clear up, we could look through and we could actually see the gold in the sluice box, especially just before cleanup. Now, they would stop these dredges and clean them up about once every 2 weeks or once every month, depending upon how much gold they were in, and sometimes only once every 2 or 3 months. But he said that they had a regular season, a regular period on his dredge that they would stop and clean up. And it was just before cleanup one time that him and his friends were looking in, and they'd been through some extremely rich material, and they could see all the gold laying in the riffles and the upper part of the sluice box every time the water get clear. But he said the day before they cleaned up, they run into some clay, and this clay would ball up in the sluice box, and he said the next time they went back and looked, there was no yellow in the sluice. So he figured that there was over $1 million worth of gold in the sluice box before they cleaned up, that was robbed by the clay and taken back. Now, if you read some of your treasure magazines and stuff like that, and of course the Gold Prospector magazine, you'll know they refer in there to sluice robbers, and when they're talking about sluice robbers, they're talking about these old clay balls, because this clay would ball up, it would come over, and it's sticky and it's clay, and it would pick the gold up in the sluice box and attach itself to it, and then the flow of the water would dump this stuff back into the tailing piles. And sometimes you'll find that. And this old timer told me this story, and I went up and I've looked at this tailing pile several times, but I haven't found the gold, and I can tell you it's over there by Sumter, Oregon, and I haven't stopped looking. This dredge doesn't happen to be the one that's over there in that area, and it's not the one that the tourists go to, but one of these days when we're sitting having coffee, old Buzzard, I'll tell you where that one is specifically. And I'm going to have Jake come out after a while, and Jake and I are going to talk about some areas where there's some tailing piles on some of the GPAA claims that you can go to. But before we get into that, I want to take this baby and I want to go up there and put it to work, because these old dredges were good, they were efficient equipment, but they didn't trap all the gold, and the gold that they left more times than not was the large nuggets, and that's the easiest one to pick up with your metal detector. Now, the detector that I'm going to use today is happened to be one that's developed specifically for finding nuggets, but any detector that you have is good for these tailing piles. It may not be good for working in a stream where that you've got very tiny nuggets that you're looking for, but if you're going out in some of the areas, now they run these bucket line dredges in Georgia and Tennessee, they run them all through the state of California and Idaho and Montana and Washington and Oregon, and they even done some dry desert dredging where they would dig out and flood the thing with a pond and put a dredge in there and work it in its own water in Arizona. So anytime that you find these old tailing piles, it's an excellent time to take your metal detector out, and you don't have to run down and buy a new detector, because these nuggets that we're talking about are big enough that you can detect them. If you're looking for very small nuggets, then of course you're going to want to get a specialized detector, and most of the major manufacturers manufacture these very specialized detectors to find these small nuggets with. But any kind of detector will work on the kind of gold that we're looking for out here this week. Let's take this baby and let's go up on this tailing pile over here and see what we can find. Well, now on these old tailing piles, there's a couple of things you're looking for. You know, sometimes you'll find there's hundreds of acres of these tailing piles, but you can eliminate some of the area, and some of the things you're looking for, you got to understand how it worked. The dredges dug sometimes 50, 60 feet deep down in the bowels of the earth. They would dig up the lower stratas of gravel, and they would dump that on top, because that's the last thing they would dig, and that would get dumped on top of the tailing pile. Then as the rain over the years, the rain and the water has washed this down, the gold is the heaviest, so the gold will be left closer to the surface, along with some of the larger rocks that's exposed. And also, while they were digging down on the bottom, there was a lot of remnant quartz, and there's remnant quartz in all these gold-bearing streams. Now, the old timers, a lot of times they'd follow it up to its source, and then they'd find the vein of quartz, but you can find a lot of remnant quartz that's got gold in it too. And of course, this would just come through like any other rock through their sluice box or their trommel. This happens to be a trommel dredge here, so what we're looking for is we're looking for the nuggets that were too large to go through their trommel screen that got kicked out into the tailing pile. And I know guys that have found solid gold nuggets as big as this quartz rock here. I don't expect to find one out here today, but maybe we'll find something. So let's turn our metal detector on. Let me get this thing tuned up here, and then we'll just kind of sweep the area. And what I usually like to do is I usually like to mark the area so that I don't go back and sweep the same area twice, you know. And we just kind of sweep it like that. I got a little indication there. Oh, I got an indication here. I can see what that is. That's a piece of barbed wire. That's a piece of old barbed wire. A lot of people save that old barbed wire, but I don't. I got quite a bit of it, so we'll just kind of keep sweeping along here, and maybe we can find something. There's a piece of quartz that's got some nice color on it. I didn't get an indication on it, so it doesn't
It doesn't appear to have any gold in it. You notice that I wear a Timex watch or one of those cheap watches that doesn't have any metal in it, so that I can do that. It's got a little bit of an indication, so that would indicate that there's maybe some metal in it. And boy, it sure looks nice. So I think I'll save that rock, and we'll just keep looking. I've got a yard plumb full of those rocks. There's so many interesting things that you can investigate. Now, what it looks like we're coming up on here, this looks like. Let me get the metal detector back here. I got to retune it because sometimes it gets out of tune. But what this looks like here, this looks like this might have been the clay. Now, the clay is hard to identify when you find it, because remember that it was clay when it was down in the wet, deep gravel, and it was full of moisture and under pressure. But when they bring it up and deposit it on top, and then the rain runs onto it, it looks like so much dirt. But we'll go over this anyway pretty closely here to see if we can find anything. Now we're getting an indication there. I don't get anything here, but I'm getting a nice indication right here, right where that big old red rock is there. So I don't get any other indication, but you want to go over these clay areas real good. But we get an indication here, so let's cut this thing off and take a look. And well, I don't see anything yet, but well, I'm still getting a pretty good indication. Ha 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 ha! Looky here, boy, just as if it was magic. A little dirty, but really pretty. Can you see that? Isn't that nice? Boy, it doesn't get any better than this. You get out of here and find this sort of stuff. Let's get Jake up here, because Jake's got some good areas. Let me turn this noise maker off. Sometimes the guys use their headphones and stuff like that, but that is a really nice nugget laying right here. I'll go over that with this detector and make sure there's no more there. No, I don't get another indication. You have to learn to use these detectors. They're not the easiest thing in the world to use the first time you get one, but boy, I'll tell you, they're really slick after they get over.
Jake, I found one. Come on over, Jake. Take a look at this nugget, boy. I'll tell you, howdy, look at that.
Hey, how's it going?
Isn't that a nice flat nugget? Gonna make a nice pendant for somebody.
Clean that dirt off.
Sit down here with me, Jake, because I got to talk to you. You know, we got a lot of friends out here that go prospecting with me every week. And I brought them out to this old derelict dredge here, and we're going over the tailing piles. And man, what do you think that beauty's worth? About 200 bucks?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, maybe three. Nice pendant. And I got to clean the dirt off of it. It's got quite a bit of dirt there, isn't that laid there? Now see, that's just too big to go through their trommel screen, Jake.
Yeah.
And so that wound up out here in the tailing pile. And I know there's a lot of areas in the GPAA claims guide, because guys want to know where they can go out. And like I said, you can use any metal detector that you've got. If you've got a metal detector, you don't have to go out and buy one of these that are specially tuned for getting gold, because they'll find real small nuggets once you get used to them. But this size gold here, these big nuggets, you can find with any metal detector you got.
You bet, any kind.
And Jake, the thing that I want you to tell us is on this claims guide, because I know you're right up to date on it.
You bet.
I want you to get the GPAA claims guide out here.
Got it right here.
And let's talk about that a little bit. As a member of the Gold Prospectors Association of America, you can go to any of the claims that are in this book, and a lot of them are river claims. You can dredge on them. You can high bank with your high banker. You can sluice, and it seems like every time we get to shooting a show, we got an airplane coming over out here at the mine.
Dropping off.
Yeah, the old bush pilot, you know. Anyway, you can go to any of these claims, keep all the gold you find, and some of them are really good for all different types of mountain. There's desert ones for dry washing and stuff like that. And the rules and regulations are in here, the BLM Forest Service, and I know you guys have got a lot of volunteers that work on these claims, Jake, and make all these areas available, and then the government keeps a lot of them available. The Park Service, the Forest Service, the BLM, that's the Bureau of Land Management, has a lot of open areas where guys can go prospecting, and all of those are listed in here. And so you can go to any of these, but you got to know where they're at. And what we're talking about today, Jake, is somewhere these old tailing piles is. So you want to show us one in there that some of the guys can go to?
Several
Now
claims.
we've got them in every state, I guess, just about most of the states where they're found gold.
Yeah, they've got claims in all the western states. Your eastern states, there's a little bit different situation, but there's places to go. And you know what, another thing that we've done at the GPAA, even if you live in some of the states in the east and the Midwest, you know, the mining guide is still good because we have the free information service. You can call up, you can talk to me, I can fill you in on areas to go back in those places and everything, specific areas.
Well, you're pretty busy, Jake. I had a guy tell me the other day, he said, I'll talk to you, Buzzard. He said, I'm a little bit disappointed I can't get through to Jake. So I took him on the telephone because sometimes Jake does get busy, but be patient with him because he'll get to you, and we're all volunteers down there at the Gold Prospectors Association, and you can tell we're not glitzy, yuppie television people either. Well, maybe the guy behind the camera is. I better not talk too loud. I'm digging a hole for myself here, but anyway, we're out digging for gold, and this is pretty easy digging. This ain't as bad as using the number 2 shovel. You won't get as much exercise. You might have to go down there at the gym and pay them a couple of bucks and get on one of the machines.
In here where they've run in the old days, they've run bucket line.
Do you know of any specific area where they've run bucket line dredges? Maybe the dredge isn't there now that a guy can go out with a metal detector and have a chance?
We've been to a couple of claims in California, but we ain't gonna tell them where they're got. Well,
let me tell you an area. Now, a good place to go, and there's some claims in here near there, and that's up near Snelling, California.
Yeah.
Out there at Snelling, there's thousands of acres of old tailing piles, and if you ask some of those farmers to let you go on them tailing piles, they'll certainly let you go. They're reclaiming some of them now. They've got some D9 dozers in there, and they're pushing some of these tailing piles down, putting topsoil back over, and reclaiming some of that farmland. That was the only environmental problem that we really had with these dredges, because they didn't really add any chemicals or pollute anything. They didn't work in the stream. They just kind of worked in their own pond, but they did eat up a lot of real good farmland, and some of that's being reclaimed now.
Sumter, Oregon, too. There's
Sumter, Oregon is a real good place, and there's a real good place back there around Dahlonega, Georgia, where there's a lot of tailing piles, and you can recognize those old tailing piles because you'll see these humps of bearing gravel.
Well, that's all we got time for today, folks, but since the Buzzard was using his metal detector, they've gotten even better and better at getting these things fine-tuned for finding gold. And a lot of people are finding gold out there with metal detectors, and the price of gold is up. So you get yours and hope you get the fever and get out there and find some gold. Until next time, see you back here for another one of these Buzzard shows.